Hello, everybody. How's everybody tonight? Hello, Bo McKimmie from cold and snowy Beaverton, Michigan. We had a good bit of snow the other day. These cold nights is a great time to tell some ghost stories. Can y'all let me know if you can hear me okay? I'm drinking some coffee. Oh. Let me see here. Oh. Yeah, looks like the volume's working good. Good. Get on here so I can see some comments and things. Okay, guys. So what I've been doing is I got on my Kindle and I downloaded some true ghost stories. Thought I could share some of these with you. And if you're not in here for the live stream, you can come back in later. Oh, I'm having a bit of trouble with my book. Let's see. So I've only read one or two of these, so I'm going to start with one I hadn't read at all. We will hear them together. First of all, how's everybody doing tonight? Everybody staying nice and toasty? Got 3 people in here that hit the like button. Thank you so much for doing that. That supports my channel by hitting that like button. Since I'm a little bit blind, especially I got my light doing the flickering candle. 12 degrees in Pittsburgh. Hi, 3 souls. It's like, excuse me, it's like in the 20s here in Northeast Alabama. It is cold. My husband's excited. He went out and shot him a little deer today, so he's going to get that processed right now. So I thought, well, while he's gone, I will tell some ghost stories. So these are allegedly true ghost stories. Hi, Christina. How are you? Nice to see all of you here. I know it's hard to stay warm, but try the best you can. It's so cold. Hi, Catherine. That's the southern accent. You got that right. I don't even realize I have an accent because I sound just like everybody else I'm around. Oh, so who's ready for some true ghost stories? The more I wipe my glasses, the more I need to. I think I got my thumbprint on that one. Y'all got your blankets, your hot cocoa, and chocolate, whatever it is you want. So I'm going to start with Blood Past. In the summer of 2002, in bed, laugh out loud. There you go. In the summer of 2002, my boyfriend and I decided to move in together as a way of becoming more independent of our parents. This move coincided perfectly with my boyfriend accepting a new job on the edge of town working security for a small manufacturing company. We scoured the area for a small home with inexpensive rent and found a quaint little house a few blocks from my boyfriend's new employer. We paid the security deposit, and within a week, we were unpacking boxes in our new home with views of the mountains from our back door. My boyfriend's job required him to work 12-hour shifts at night, so I was left alone most of the time. While this area of town was not known to be dangerous or rough, I could not help but feel slightly unsettled in the quiet of our house at night. A few weeks after moving in, while my boyfriend was at work one night, I started to hear the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps throughout the house. Knowing I was alone in the house, I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and went room to room, checking for anyone or anything that could have made those sounds. As I was moving from the bedroom into the hallway towards the living room, I began hearing loud banging, not unlike the metallic clanging of a hammer on a rock. These sounds went on for several nights, and I did my best to convince my husband of what was going on. However, he dismissed the sounds as simply the house making noise as it settled from the day. Neither one of us believed in the paranormal and was highly skeptical of things like ghosts. But I knew what I had experienced, and it was not the normal sounds of a house settling. I was starting to believe that our house was possibly haunted. Was soon fully convinced when a series of events occurred that chilled me to my very core. One weekend, when my boyfriend was off from his job, we settled in for bed. Hey, boo boo! Hey, Justy, thanks for joining us. It is freezing. Okay. As usual, we heard the footsteps and the banging, and my boyfriend was still as dismissive as ever of the sounds as normal. I tried to go to sleep, but even though I was tired, I could not rest. I tossed and turned for what felt like hours until I opened my eyes to check the time. The alarm clock showed it had only been a couple of hours, and my boyfriend was in a deep sleep. Hi, Cassie. How are you? For those that just joined, we are reading true ghost stories. Maybe these stories will keep you warm on this cold, spooky night. Love it. I looked around the room, and in the moonlight, I could see someone standing at the foot of our bed. I should turn my volume down so you don't hear my notifications. I was immediately struck motionless in fear. Had someone broken into her house? You're funny, Justy. That's all right. Was he waiting for me to scream so that he could kill us as we slept? I wiped my eyes, trying to make sure I saw as much detail about this person as I could for when I call the police. That was when I noticed that the figure staring at me from the end of the bed was an older man, possibly in his 60s. He wore an old button-down gray shirt and denim overalls. His clothes appeared to be in tatters and were covered in dirt. After staring at me for a few minutes, he turned towards the bedroom door and began walking away from us. It was then that I noticed this man could not have possibly been alive. The back of the old man's, the cat, what this right here? That's my dog. Was that, or is it your cat? My shorty stays right there beside me. It's about like a cat. The back of the old man's head looked as though it had been beaten in with something. That's funny. It was sunken in, and his hair was matted to the back of his skull, thick with blood. Now, this is supposed to be a true story. Can you only imagine? I finally came to my senses and screamed, waking my boyfriend from his slumber. I was frightened horribly to the point of crying hysterically. He grabbed a baseball bat and quickly went room to room looking for any signs of an intruder. Hi, Sherry. How are you? To my horror, he found no one and questioned what I saw as a dream or a hallucination caused by the moonlight playing in the room. When he questioned me, patronizing my fear and pain, I knew I had to get out of this house. We argued for hours, and I ultimately packed an overnight bag with clothes to go stay at my parents' house. Since he had not seen anything and did not believe what I was telling him, he stayed behind and I went off to and he went off to work. I explained to my parents the unnerving noises I had heard and the old man in our room and how he had vanished. Hi, Sable. So glad you got your notification. These are allegedly true haunted stories. So this girl has moved into this house with her boyfriend and has seen. Hi, Cindy. Um, she has seen a man with his head bashed in and blood matted to his back of his head, standing at the foot of her bed, but her boyfriend does not believe her, so she has packed her bag to go to her parents' house. I explained to my parents the unnerving noises I had heard and the old man in our room and how he had vanished. My dad told me that even though he did not know much about our house, he did know the area where it was built fairly well. Back in the 1800s, there were several mining camps located there, as the mountains nearby had been sources of gold and copper. It was fairly common in those days for miners to lay claim to parcels of land, and even more common for them to fight over those lots. There have been numerous reports that back in those days, several miners would end up dead, attacked in their sleep by greedy competitors looking to find a big payload in their mines. Upon hearing this, I put all of the clues together. The sounds of metallic banging were a miner's hammer or a pickaxe hitting stone. The old man I had seen must have been one of those dead miners killed by one of his rivals. I called up my boyfriend to let him know what I had learned of the home's potential past and history of the area. He shockingly agreed with me. Taken aback by his sudden change of heart, I asked him why he decided that I was right. He told me that as much as he hated to admit it, our house was haunted. The bloody old man that had frightened me so horrifically that night had finally appeared to him. We decided to call the local church and asked if the priest could come to our home and do a series of cleansings of the house and land to rid us of the ghostly activities. Since those cleansings, everything has become so more peaceful again for now. So that's the first story. Getting on the other one, I'm going to sip me some coffee real quick. This one's called Tragic Descent. I don't know what this is about either. Reading these stories with you for the very first time. Excuse me. I grew up in a household that believed in the paranormal, especially ghosts. With my dad being a mortician, he taught my little brother and me early on that death was a natural part of life and that sometimes spirits lingered behind in places where they had unfinished business. Oh yeah, my my dad's girlfriend made that for me, and it is so cozy. I often wondered if my dad encountered any ghosts at his job and if they ever followed him home. He assured my brother and me that he never brought his work home, but one particular event started my life on a very dark spiral. Around age 16 or 17, I remember Dad telling me, my mother, brother, and me about a recent body that he had prepared for a funeral. That person had been in prison for the murders of 10 women and children a few years before my birth. Apparently, this guy was such an evil person that he was ultimately stabbed by several other inmates and left to die from his wounds. The simple thought that someone was that malicious and uncaring sent a shiver down my spine, but I quickly put those thoughts out of my mind as a light knocking came from the front door. My mother answered it, and my closest friend Brandon came in to hang out with me. Hi, Paranormal Side. Welcome. Hope you're staying warm tonight with us in these ghost stories. We spent the rest of the afternoon drawing and coloring superheroes and pretend fighting off bands of pirates in the backyard. He asked my parents if he could spend the night, and they called his parents, who agreed, and brought over his clothes and sleeping bag. We set up our sleeping bags in the living room and gathered some snacks to watch television with. While we laughed at the characters on the screen, I could see a large shadow moving out of the corner of my eye. I ignored it at first until I kept noticing it darting back and forth in the doorway that led to the bedrooms. Then I noticed it changed color, now becoming a pale white color. I turned my attention to the doorway, and there stood a pale, translucent figure of a boy, seemingly the same age as Brandon and myself. The moment my dog over here on the couch is having trouble finding his sweet spot on the couch, so ignore his crying. The moment my eyes made contact with his, it felt as though we were immediately bound to each other through some sort of invisible soul cord. Brandon tapped me on the shoulders, bringing me out of my trance. He said he had noticed the boy as well and was creeped out by him. At that moment, the boy darted down the hallway towards the bedrooms. We got up and ran after him, but try as we may, we never found the mysterious boy. It could not have been Dad or Mom or even my little brother playing a trick on us either, as they were all in bed, fast asleep with their lights off. After that night, I would continue to see the boy from time to time, as well as shadows darting around the house at random times. I tried to tell Dad and Mom what we had seen, but he simply said it was our overactive imaginations or attributed it to my brother trying to prank me. This activity went on for over 2 years until Dad took a job managing a new funeral home in a different town, and we moved away from that house. We settled into our new house, and a now 8-year-old me was adjusting fairly well to the new house and new friends in the neighborhood. However, about a month later, I noticed odd things started happening. I would hear footsteps going up and down the hallway, even when everyone else was outside. I could also hear strange, distorted mumblings as incoherent voices. Occasionally, I would hear the distinct sound of a young girl's laughter when there were no little girls in the house. Sorry, I don't know what my thing's doing. My phone went to sleep. Okay. When there were no little girls in the house, followed by the heaviest footsteps stomping throughout the house. Footsteps that were very clearly not those of a little girl. Then came proof that even my skeptical father could not refute. As we were sitting in the living room one evening watching television, I could feel a strange burning sensation on my back. A small yelp escaped from my mouth, and my mom asked me what was wrong. I told her to look at my back, and to her horror, there were a set of 3 scratches running across my back, red and swollen with several spots of blood where something had broken the skin. Every day after that, I woke up to new scratches or bruises. Weird, breathy exhales could be heard in the house at random times by everyone. And one night, I woke my parents and brother from a dead sleep with screaming. They all rushed to my bedroom to see me in a tug of war with an unseen force trying to pull the covers off my bed. Although they could not see it, I could make out a large, tall, black figure staring at me with the scariest eyes I had ever seen. I could only see half of its body, and as soon as it realized that my family was there, It let go of the covers and vanished. Shortly after the cover incident, my brother and I were playing in my room, and he heard a deep and very low growling coming from my closet. He said that it did not sound like a dog or an animal that he knew of, and he refused to play in my room ever again after that day. To this day, I'm plagued with horrible nightmares, often of me being chased by demonic entities. I honestly believe that in all those years ago, when Dad was working on that murderer's body, that his evil soul followed Dad home and used the form of a little boy as a way to attach itself to me. I live in constant fear that the murderer's spirit or something far more sinister is trying to possess me. I really could I really should try to have the attachment broken or cleansed, but it will not let me do it. It wants to claim me, body and soul. Ooh, that was the end of that one. That was one for the Travel Channel, huh? Oh, creepy. Let me see which next the book I want to. That's creepy, huh? Trying to find the story. Oh, it don't really give you options to tell you what they're called. Okay. This one is going to be called Vivid, and I'm going to update my comments down here. This probably happened around 2.5 or 3 years ago, but it still scares me senseless every time I think about it. The whole ordeal lasted about 6 months and began when my boyfriend was getting ready to move out of his apartment and into a nice duplex downtown. The homes down there are old. The area was finished around the 1950s, so most of them are up to 20 years older than that. A day or two before he and his roommates moved into the place, my boyfriend had a very vivid dream. He dreamt that something was trying to haunt him and his roommates in their current apartment, so he decided to try and perform an exorcism to get the ghost to leave. He had been sitting on the bed doing some sort of meditation when suddenly the ghost of a young girl appeared. She was pissed. She started throwing things and yelling at him. Get the F, I won't say the word, out of my house, over and over again. He said that she was screaming so hard the cords in her neck stood out. And she wasn't alone. A tall man hovered above her, silent and watching my boyfriend with empty eyes. He had woken up in a brush next to me, breathing heavily and looking around the room frantically. It freaked me out watching him panic and able to catch his breath. After they moved into the new house downtown, things were going well except for the occasional bizarre dream. We didn't think too much about them. One day we were all outside hanging out on the porch when the neighbor from the connecting duplex came over and started describing his own weird dreams to us. We all stood there freaking out as we listened to him explain. It was almost identical to the dreams that my boyfriend had. The longer they were in the house, things beside the dream started to happen. Weird little things. Lights would turn on randomly, floorboards would creak with the sound of footsteps when no one was walking down the hall, and the rocking chair would move on its own, things like that. We had all acknowledged by that point that there was something in the house with us, but that it wasn't mean or vengeful. I had never really been scared about the things going on at the duplex up until that point. Not until one night when I was sleeping in my own house. I'd been having a weird dream, the kind where you kind of wake up in that state of almost sleep but can still sense the room around you. There was something in my room with me. I could tell, but I couldn't see anything. I was looking around, trying to find it, when whatever it was sat down on my chest. I couldn't breathe. My legs were pinned to the bed. I couldn't even move. Minutes passed as I lay there, struggling to breathe or move before the pressure lifted and I could jump up. I had never been so terrified in my life. Immediately, I called my boyfriend and he soothed me back to sleep over the phone. The next day, however, he told me that he wondered if maybe what I experienced had something to do with the girl or hovering man from his dream. Things got creepier from then on out. I got a call from my boyfriend one night after he had gotten off work. He had been at home sitting in his room in the basement playing guitar when he had heard something in the other basement room and that startled him. He continued to play even though he was spooked. When he heard footsteps coming from upstairs, though, he grabbed his phone and ran outside. He was home alone. Getting as far away from the house as he could with the landline, he called me. We talked for a little, having a normal conversation when he stopped. "What is it?" I asked him, hearing his breathing change over the phone. "There's a figure on the front porch," he told me, whispering. He said that the figure was just standing in front of the door, waiting, distinctly visible against the porch lights. It wasn't until his roommate got home a few hours later that he finally would walk near the house again. A little while after that, I was staying at my dad's house out in the country for a couple of nights. Sleeping in his office one night, I had a pretty vivid dream. Most of it was just nonsense, but this girl kept appearing. She had long, bushy brown hair, wore glasses, and had a big puffy 70s-style winter coat. She kept glaring at me, and at one point it felt like someone was hovering over me as I was sleeping. I jumped awake, more so startled than scared, and went back to sleep. A week or so later, I told my boyfriend about it, watching his eyes widen, and he grew quiet. My description matched exactly the girl he had seen in his first dream. About a month later, after a party we threw at the house, one of our friends ended up sleeping on the couch. When one of my boyfriend's roommates woke up around 2 a.m., she was no longer on the couch. Later that afternoon, she called and told us that around 1 in the morning she heard someone walking around in the kitchen for a really long time. Ignoring it, she tried to go back to sleep. It was then, as she was on the verge of dreaming, that she heard the footsteps take off running. They ran hard and fast from the kitchen, stopping directly in front of the couch where she slept. Without a second thought, she jumped up, grabbing her things, and went home in the freezing cold at nearly 3:15 a.m. in the morning. It was only a couple of nights after that incident that my boyfriend had the biggest scare. He had a very, very vivid dream, lucid almost. In the dream, he had been trying to get out of the house, but he was trapped. Something pushed him down, and halfway between the basement and the first floor, he was struck at the waist, something pushing on his shoulders still. He had been struggling hard, trying to wake up, move, speak, or anything. When he finally did wake up, he looked over to see a bluish haze in the corner of the room. It looked like part of her torso, a woman's torso, before it disappeared into his bookcase. He jumped up out of bed and ran upstairs as fast as he could, banging on his roommate's bedroom door. They sat on the couch as my boyfriend explained what happened when all of a sudden the lamp next to them turned itself on. Refusing to stay inside any longer, they sat awake on the porch all night. Alone in the house the next day, my boyfriend calmly told whatever was in their house to leave them alone. The activity ceased after that, but the house never stopped freaking us out. One of the roommate's fathers, who was a Native American medicine man, even did a cleansing ritual at the house. That ritual cleansed out whatever was left, and the heaviness in the home dissipated. So that's the end of that story. Another sip of coffee. This one is called The Lake House. When it came to evaluating properties, my dad has always been an expert. In his field, you kind of have to be in order to be any good. He's an appraiser, meaning he inspects the property to determine its market value. He never bought a property that he evaluated, that is, until he found our lake house. The home itself was older construction than most of the other properties around the body of water. But my dad said it had good bones, which I've learned means that it doesn't look good now, but it will once we put a lot of work into it. The first time we drove up the gravel driveway was a magical experience for me. My older sister and her fiancé Greg were joining us for a family getaway. The scene couldn't have been more perfect. The sunset reflecting off the rippling surface of the water was a perfect background to dim the exterior of the house. All week I'd worn thin my friends' patience with me as I continued to tell them, I'm going to my lake house this weekend. It made me feel like some sort of celebrity. In hindsight, it probably made me sound like a braggart. After a satisfying stretch, we unloaded our bags from the car and raced inside hopes of scoring the best rooms we could. My sister and I were particularly competitive since we both understood that the room we selected was most likely going to be dubbed our room every time we came here. She was older and stronger than I was, but speed was on my side, and I got to the top of the stairs faster. I made a gamble and ran to the door at the end of the hall, first leaving behind the other selections. The risk paid off. I opened the door and was greeted by a room with two windows, one facing the lake and the other in the direction of the forest. This had been my goal. I wanted a view of the water, and I had gotten it. After laying claim to my room, which for me constituted throwing my suitcase on top of the bed, we had agreed to come downstairs for a quick family meeting. Mom and Dad wanted to make plans on how to spend the weekend. All of us liked the outdoors, so it was a given that there would be hiking and swimming, but beyond that, we would kind of play things by ear. The drive had been a long one, and we were all anxious to get some sleep. I dragged myself up to the room and flopped down on the bed. I intended on reading a little bit of the book I had brought with me. But as soon as I lay back, all the energy I had left seemed just to drain out of me. I was asleep in minutes. Cold. It was the first thing that crossed my mind when I woke up. I pulled the covers around me tightly, trying to better trap the heat of my own body. Somehow this only seemed to make things worse. I rolled over, hoping that the shifting would somehow help. My teeth chattered against each other as I pulled my legs to my chest. I could feel the goose flesh prickling on my arms as I rubbed my hands against them, desperate for the warmth to come. I'd never felt so cold nestled under the covers. I wish I knew where were the extra blankets. There's a lot of grammatical errors in this book. I'm trying to keep up with them. But I sure was a little heat there would be dissipate if I left the safety of my bed. Opened my eyes and looked to the window, almost sure it had to be open. The air might have been still, but even the slightest crack would explain the crisp temperature. Only a trickle of light seeped through the windows, barely allowing me to see a few inches in front of me. I rubbed at my eyes, but the darkness refused to abate. At the foot of my bed, a floorboard groaned. The shrill noise echoed in the silence. I told myself it was just the wood contracting from the cold. Nothing to worry about. Then it happened again, closer this time. My breath shuddered in my throat. Someone was in my room. Another footstep right at the foot of my bed. A battle waged inside my head whether to speak or to remain silent. Finally, I couldn't stand it any longer. Hello? The springs let out a groan as the mattress depressed near my feet. They were right next to me. I regretted speaking, but I'd already made my choice. There was no sense in feigning sleep now. Mom, Dad, is that you? I already knew the answer. They would have first said something or not before coming in, even at this late hour. My skin burned as I felt something cold coil around my ankles. I tried to pull away, but the movement shot pain up through my legs. I opened my mouth to scream, but there was no sound. Again and again I tried to call for help, but my voice remained mute. The chill wound its way further up my body. Whatever this was seemed to have no physical form. Still, a crushing weight bounced me in place. When it reached my stomach, I tried to take in a breath, but I couldn't get my lungs to pull in air. I felt like I was drowning, choking on the dark itself. The pressure moved it to my chest. I fought with everything I had, trying to get the oxygen to my lungs, but the weight was so heavy. I fought, straining against the cold. The burning in my chest was unbearable. I needed air. My vision started to tunnel in on itself. I fought to remain conscious. My lungs heaved with depression. My body fought for survival, clinging to life, but the effort was in vain. The weight was too much, and I felt so tired. I just wanted to go to sleep. Pain beyond anything I thought possible lanced through me. My chest rose and fell, taking in great gulps of air. The weight and the cold were gone. The shadows also didn't appear quite so dark as before. I could actually see the bits of furniture that had been placed. My eyes swept around the edges of the room. With my door still shut, there was no way someone could have left without making a sound. The pain in my chest had subsided to a minor ache, and I finally stopped gasping with every breath, even though I couldn't see anyone else there. I couldn't let go of the feeling that someone else was there. Through the rest of the night, my nerves were shot. Every sound I heard, I would shoot up in bed expecting the worst. The entire time, I sat there trying to convince myself to get up, but the thought of leaving my bed before morning sent chills down my spine. By the time I got down to breakfast in the morning, my eyes were burning and every move seemed to take twice as much energy as it should. I needed sleep, but I didn't think I'd find it in my room, even in the daylight. My brain wasn't working much better since it was my mom who drew my attention to my sister. Both of you looked exhausted. Did you stay up too late? Even from the first look, I knew something was wrong. Her skin was pale and her eyes, although wide, were bloodshot. From the startled look she gave me, I knew I didn't look much better. Are you okay? She asked me. My only response was to look at my lap and shake my head. I didn't want to tell her what happened. Thinking about it was bad enough, but to be made fun of, or worse, be called a liar, was the last thing I needed that morning. I saw something last night. My eyes flew up to her face when she said this. She fiddled with a spoon on the table for a few seconds before continuing. There was a woman. She was standing there, staring at me and Greg. The rest of it came quicker. She relayed every detail, including the most disturbing, that the woman just vanished. My own story came out in torrent. Now that I knew I hadn't been alone in my experience, I was no longer afraid of the judgment. She listened quietly until I was finished. Then she said only 7 words. We have to tell Mom and Dad. I knew she was right, but I didn't expect them to believe the two of us as readily as we had each other. In the end, together, we convinced them we had to leave. We told our dad that we would never come back to that house again. It was another year before our parents sold the house. I think he finally understood it was never going to be the happy family place he had hoped. Still to this day, I'm not sure what it was that attacked me in that bedroom. If it had wanted to kill me, it could have. I think it was just trying to tell us we weren't welcome there and that we were trespassing somewhere we didn't belong. That house, that room in particular, belonged to someone else. I'm going to read one more before we get going because I've been here, 39 minutes. So I'm going to drink me some more coffee. This one, watch out for karma. I rolled down my window. The warm springtime air flowed into the cruiser. I took a sip of coffee. I shook the cup. I was almost out. Crap, I thought. I knew I wouldn't be able to stay here long without more coffee. Working the night shift is something you get used to, but only so much. Coffee is the lifeblood of my work. I looked out the window. A woman walked her dog down the sidewalk. I waved to her. She smiled and waved back. That's nice, I thought. Sometimes people don't wave to cops. Sometimes people walk in the other direction for whatever reason. I'd been there for nearly an hour waiting for one person I wanted to catch. Word had it that there was one driver in this area who always sped. Okay. And not just 10 over. We're talking 30, 40 in a residential area. It put people in danger. Apparently, it was like clockwork. Every night he came flying down these roads. When I heard, I had one of my feelings. Gut feeling may be the best way to describe it. But I think it may be deeper than my gut. Everybody gets gut feelings. I have a sense that not everybody gets these feelings. Something about them is special, unique to me. At least I've never met someone else who seems to share the same level of feeling. Anyway, I got one of my feelings and I knew. I asked to be assigned to patrol this neighborhood on my next shift, and there I was. I was going to be the one to catch this a-hole. I had to. But my coffee was running low, and if I fell asleep, that wouldn't have helped no one. I nursed the last couple sips as long as I could. Nothing, no one. Just a quiet night in a decent neighborhood. I started the cruiser annoyed and disappointed, and just at that moment, whoosh, I felt like I was at a NASCAR race. This guy sped by me going at least 40 miles over the speed limit. This is my moment, I thought. I sped after him, sirens blaring, lights flashing. He noticed and I saw the moment when he contemplated trying to outdrive me. I've pulled over enough people to see my fair share of fools who think they can outrun the cops. But he decided not to, slowed down, and finally stopped. I pulled up after him. The car was a deep maroon Nissan sedan, nothing fancy. Hi, Julie. I'm on my last story here, but it'll be saved on to my channel so you can rewatch them. The stories any stories you missed. Let's see. Okay. I got out of my car, started walking to his window. I caught a glimpse of him in the mirror, and just like that, I knew. I knew this guy. The whole police department knew this guy. This guy was famous, well, more like infamous. His record read like a crime novel. Drugs, theft, assault. I felt a brief pangs of nerves, but composed myself. I walked up to his window and tapped on it. He rolled it down. He did not look happy. What the F do you want, officer? Excuse me, I said, surprised at his brashness and his boldness. What are you going to give me, a ticket? Do you realize how fast you were speeding? He didn't answer. I waited. He was turning red with anger. Can I see your license and registration, please? I asked, trying to be civil and polite. Go F yourself. I felt myself getting angry. I'm sorry? Go F yourself. Go F your mama, your dad. You know what? I hope your whole family dies. Get out of the car. In fact, maybe I'll kill him myself. And he's finally saying, get the out of the car. Why? You're under arrest. Under arrest for what? For reckless driving and now for making verbal threats to a police officer. He saw that I was serious and seriously angry, and he got out. I slammed him against the car, cuffed him, took him straight to jail. Of course, guys like this have friends in low places, so he was bailed out that night. But when the court date came a month later, he was nowhere to be found. Big surprise. We should have warrant for his arrest, and the department said about finding him, bringing him to justice. I would have helped, but his words kept bouncing in my head. In fact, maybe I'll kill them myself. I had another feeling, a feeling that surprisingly he was a man of his word, that he was the type of guy who would threaten a cop and just might go through with it. I took a leave of absence. I couldn't bear a minute away from my family, knowing this guy was out there. I stayed home to protect them. I told them I had some time off accrued from work that I was taking. I didn't want to scare them. The department finally found him, living in a house out in the country. He probably thought he could escape us by being out that far, but he was wrong. They searched his house, and surprise, surprise, it was filled with all kinds of goodies. Drugs, illegal firearms, stolen objects, stolen vehicles lay strewn on his yard. This one house kept the department busy for months. He was dragged to court and sentenced to years behind bars, every one which he deserved. I could return to work knowing that my family was safe and everyone around the city could breathe a little easier knowing he wasn't around. But I can't take any credit for his apprehension or arrest. It was karma. Karma gives me these feelings. Karma gives me empathy, makes me feel things that others don't. Things that lead me down different roads, some of which may seem scary or dangerous at first, but end up being right. In the end, I trust my gut 100% of the time. It hasn't let me down yet. So that wasn't necessarily a ghost story, but I guess it was more of a psychic type of story. I don't know. But I've been on here for about 45 minutes, so I guess I'm going to get off for right now. I've got a bunch more stories that I've downloaded to my Kindle that I'm going to be reading sometime in the future. And I have a video I'm planning coming up of going to places in my area that have ghost stories, local legends attached to them, and I'm going to plan on going to each of these areas to tell those stories. I do have a personal house investigation I'm doing tomorrow night. Don't know that I will film anything for my channel because I've never met this woman before. It's just somebody in another town, but she has seen things in her house and gotten things on camera and wanted somebody to come out and investigate for her. So I told her I would. So we'll see how that goes. I do have a couple of videos with me and Dad that I'll be putting out in the meantime and be working on some new ones. If you like these little live ghost stories or pre-recorded live ghost story, or not pre-recorded live, but just pre-recorded, let me know which way you like it. Do you like ghost stories read to you live like this, or do you want pre-recorded things with some different type of ambiences playing on the screen and stuff? Y'all just let me know what you like. I'm going to read through the comments right here. Okay. Making sure I got everybody. But thank you all for being here. Stay warm, stay bundled up, and don't have nightmares. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Oh, thank you, Julie. Love you guys. Have a great night and excellent weekend. Bye-bye.